Duncan, let's to start off with, for those that aren't aware, it'd be useful if you could just give a brief introduction to the business that you're a chief exec of.
Sure. Firstly, thanks for having me on the podcast. I feel like I'm following some previous guests, so very honoured. Rapid News Group, been around for a while now, but probably only a grown-up business for the last 10 years. We're a B2B publisher and event organiser, and increasingly digital technology provider. We specialise in B2B technology, so we operate in the plastic space, the packaging space, the medical space, and the 3D printing space. That's our sweet spot. Over the years, every time we tried to do something outside of that, we've invariably spent an awful lot of money and not gone very far. So over the years, we've that our happy places in that space, and that's where we focus. So a lot of brands, some overseas interests as well, which I'm sure we'll get into.
Yeah.
That's us.
Thank you. Yeah, we're going to talk about specialisms as well, because it's definitely, I think, a word of which is sort of on vogue at the moment. We're going to obviously talk about present day and the future, but if you can indulge me, I'd like to take you back, if I can, to the dark, deep days of the pandemic. I won't dwell on it for too long, but in particular, I know that you were one of the companies that were dramatically affected, should I say, from the situation in China, which obviously closed before UK, before Europe, and most of the rest of the world. So, not to be salacious, but I'm just definitely interested in a retrospective look at that time. So, if you could just give us a view of how it affected the business, specifically in that region, that'd be appreciated.
Well, I think any organizer of any event, but certainly one that has multiple events in multiple territories, I think we all probably look back at that now and wonder how we got through it. Probably with a degree of pride that we did, because it was certainly a tough period. I can remember flying out to our Japanese event back in January 2020, having just postponed our China event that was due in March, which obviously wasn't going to go ahead. And that was the start of it. Japan was the last time I got on a plane for 2.5 years, and it was kind of a crazy period. We postponed some UK events as soon as I got back from Japan, and carried on postponing events for the next 6 to 12 months in various ways. I think I've said before in another place that I don't think we ever wanted to be an expert in postponing shows, but we certainly became that. We'd never postponed one before, but here we are, becoming pretty good at it. So I think we, as a small business, we did all the right things. We battened down hatches, we furloughed, we took out some C-bills, loans to help us through the piece, and pleasingly, we got through the other side. And I think our brands are strong in the UK, that helped. And of course, we've got the media side, which meant we could continue trading through the piece, which a lot of exhibition organisers didn't have that capacity.
Yeah.
We watched a lot of people kind of pivot to digital. We already did digital, so we weren't pivoting, but we certainly weren't investing as much in virtual events as a number of companies did, because we always felt that live events would bounce back, and sure enough, slowly but surely they did. I think the incident you referred to in China is an interesting one. So we pretty much ran our shows in China all the way through, albeit very Chinese focused shows in the end. They typically were more international before that. And we'd run in late 20 and 21, but there was actually the show in 22 that got kiboshed in the most spectacular way, because literally the night before we'd opened, we built the show, and at 11 o'clock the night before we opened in September 22, the authorities said you can't, and that was that. So we had a show built, ready to go, and frantic calling from our Chinese team. at 11 o'clock the night before a show to explain to exhibitors that although they painstakingly built their show, they weren't going to be allowed into it the next morning, which, as you can imagine, was a challenge for them. And of course, we sat in the UK, weren't really able to do an awful lot other than provide morale support. So, definitely interesting times and challenging situations that I don't think any of us had to. So.
No, I'm sure we could probably compile a book of stories of incidents that happened to exhibition organisers in maybe 10 or 15 years' time and look back at it. But thank you. I guess I'm also interested in sort of, obviously there's a lot of doubt, there's a lot of indecision. People are fearful, staff, exhibitors, everyone to do with the communities you serve. As the CEO, because it's easy for us to think about everyone else and think, the bosses are all right and this, that, and the other. How did it affect you personally, and how did you deal with that?
I think you're right. You want to look after your staff first and foremost, and I kind of took solace in the fact that we were always trying to do the right thing by them, as difficult as it was in cases.
Sure.
We kept the staff informed of where we were. We were really sort of open and honest about furlough and what that meant and what our plans were coming back. And largely, people stuck with us for sure. And I think every event organizer experienced this. There were some that felt that the sector was just too risky to continue relying on getting their mortgage paid from, decided to leave. And I think that skills shortage will continue to hurt us as an industry for a period of time until it rebalances. But I think, I kind of slept at night knowing that a lot of other organisers were in the same boat. And actually, obviously, I joined a lot of the AEO calls at the time. And, we were all rowing frantically trying to bail the boat out. But at least I took solace in the fact that there were a lot of us in the same boat. And that, plus the fact that, you're trying to do the right thing. We always knew that we had robust brands. We got a lot of support from our customers, and so those things kind of made it okay. But for sure, there were mornings when I'd start work at 8 o'clock, and by 9 o'clock, think this is going to be one of those days again when the government took a left turn and we thought they were going right and that kind of stuff. But as a leader, you kind of have to try and put some of your own personal feelings to one side, because at the end of the day, I'm responsible for people paying their mortgage. That has to come over your own personal sort of challenges.
Sure. It's interesting. Lots of people have said to me about the power of the community, all levels during that time, and how no one wanted to be in it, but the fact you're all in it together definitely helps. So strength through adversity, I think.
Well, interesting enough, one of the most interesting things to come out of that was, we're up in the north, so we're not really on the circuit from an event organizer point of view. But we're members of the AEO, and obviously Chris was working really, really hard on behalf of us all with government. And those calls that were sort of CEO-based calls actually meant that my connections were probably expanded in terms of colleagues that were in the same role. And some of that's actually resulted in us doing some really interesting co-locations down the road, which so there are positives that came out of the chaos. And that continues to be the case. So, you have to take the positive from all of this stuff. Otherwise, you go stir crazy. So every little win celebrated hugely, and that kind of carried us through the next chaos piece. So, definitely a learning experience, and we're better for it, even though it didn't feel like it at the time.
Thank you. Want to talk about the business as it stands today, and then obviously talk about some challenges for the industry. Having a good look through your website, some of your material, what I get a sense of running through the descriptions that I read is the theme that the business has always been about connections. Just explain what you mean by that.
Well, look, we exist to bring businesses together. You can dress it up how you will, but in all the areas that we operate, our job is to bring buyers together with technology providers, and in hope that they will acquire technology and make their own organisations more efficient or more productive or more competitive in an international market, whatever it might be. And so whether that's readers reading a magazine and interacting with a print advert, which granted is less frequent these days, still an important part of what we do. Our digital plays where we do things like webinars or newsletters. Again, it's taking technology information to people who want to access that. And obviously, the shows are the purest manifestation of bringing people together to access technology. So everything we do and all those sort of threads are ultimately designed to bring people together and create business. So we often refer to ourselves as a catalyst, and in all the sectors that we operate in, that's the mission. So great quality content, really good insights, hopefully a really good data set, and then we create the environment for those two to come together.
Yeah. It's interesting because, as you said, the business Rapid News has obviously always been a specialist in certain areas and also always served those communities with multiple platforms. So you've mentioned some of them there. During the pandemic, obviously lots of trade shows were rushing to do that in reverse. And what you do, again, speaking to, I've got the privilege of speaking to lots of CEOs at some of the organisers. Lots of the M&A activity in the industry is definitely being dictated by picking up shows, but also shows that have other media that are serving specialist communities. Do you see that generally? Do you think as an industry there's going to be more of that? So people are going to be, I think the word during the pandemic, I don't know how much it's used now, is omni-channel. But just serving communities in different ways. Do you think there's going to be just more of that going forward?
I think it's really interesting, actually. A lot of the event organisers were tanking along doing just pure play events, which were incredibly profitable, with no sign on the horizon that they were ever going to stop. Of course, along came COVID and everybody had to rethink because they couldn't generate revenue in square metre sales, which had been going so well. And of course, for a period of time, everybody said that was the end of exhibitions and live events wouldn't come back. We never subscribed to that in any way, shape, or form. We knew the power of digital, but we also knew that it couldn't replace the power of face-to-face. So for us, it was a question of sort of working our way through it. But the big underpin for all of that was our ability to talk to our audiences in multiple ways when we couldn't do shows. And so whether that was newsletters or webinars or the print magazine or the website or social media. And I think what you've seen is a number of event organisers that you might have termed previously pure play event organisers have now said, well, actually, maybe there is some value in the content team and the community around it. So I don't expect it to change, and I expect more organisations to kind of come towards the model that we've got. Although, to be fair, a lot of them are already doing a lot of work in the data space and in the insight space. So probably just doubling down and realising how important that element is if you want to retain a position in the community or the market that you serve.
Sure. And you've mentioned data a few times, and obviously it's ever more important. And the ways that we can now manipulate data through AI and other technology, obviously the quickens the pace to give us the insights that you just referred to.
I mean, we've always seen data as absolutely key to what we do. If you don't have a good data set, then nobody comes to your shows, nobody reads your magazines, and ultimately you end up with shells that don't go very far and don't deliver.
Sure.
And that just results in failure. So we've always worked hard on our data. Our magazines typically are BPA audited. Our shows, have been audited in the past and will be again. So from that point of view, I think data is absolutely essential. And without that, you can't deliver. But further, I think the real driver here is the ability to segment, and that really feeds into the marketing side. So if you can take a really tailored message to somebody who is a pretty good target with a set of really good reasons to get out of the office, I think that's where one of the key focuses for us. But obviously AI and how we use that is super important. I can't profess to even have got my head around what that means for the event industry or the content industry, although it will mean something. So we've got a task force internally starting now to pick apart the noise and try and understand what that really means for our business. I'm sure there'll be some wins, and I'm sure there'll be some reasons for us to adapt how we do things. So it's the same when digital publishing arrived. We had to change the way we did print magazines because there was a new thing on the horizon. I think in all of these cases, much in the same as the sort of digital events are going to take over live events. Once something new appears, there's a rush to kind of invest and understand it. Rightly or wrongly, we've always been, because probably as a smaller company, we don't have oodles of cash to just invest in this stuff. We've always been more of a, right, let's see what this really means, and then kind of gradually pick the bits that make good sense for us. But when I tried to do a virtual event on a CD-ROM back in the late 90s, it was terrible then. We knew it when we got the pandemic. And so we were okay with just sitting and waiting to see what the right course of action was. And actually the platform we use now span out of all of that. And it's kind of been a digital platform that now has become more of a live event platform. But what it does is it does enable us to extend the time that the live event is viable for our exhibitors. And so we've used some of that, if you like, virtual event technology to enhance what we do. So again, a good example is waiting to find the sweet spot in the technology to help us accelerate our mission rather than ploughing millions or hundreds of millions into.
I agree with you. Rather than just using it for the sake of it, I guess also as a relatively small business, you can test things quite quickly as well and see what works and what doesn't work. But there is a cost, if not in pounds, shillings, dollars, or euros, but in terms of people's time, and also in a smallish business, they've got their jobs to do, so need to be conscious of that.
Yeah, I suppose one of the most useful parts of the pandemic is we could do a lot of stuff. So actually, we did get to work on the business in terms of the vision and some of the structure. So again, you take the positives out of a difficult situation and use it to your advantage. So
you've recently had some shows, TCT 360 Birmingham, MedTech Innovation also in Birmingham in June, and Medilink UK. I'm reading those off my piece of paper. Always interested to know, sort of post-pandemic and post-post, because we're that's in the rearview mirror. What are the main things that you've noticed in terms of the demands of maybe exhibitors, attendees, other stakeholders in your products? How have they changed, do you think, over the last 2 or 3 years?
That's a good question. How long have you got? I think that we're trying to drag exhibitors to use digital technology to really enhance their experience at the show. And there's a real range of uptake on that. You've got some companies that are super on it, did proper outreach to the visitors before the show, had meetings scheduled when they arrived at the show, and have continued to do outreach subsequently. And there's some that just didn't use it at all. So you've got a real range in the space that we operate in. You've got sort of one-man band engineering companies at the lower end that have taken a small stand and it's their entire sort of focus for a month, but they're only going to do the show. And then you've got other companies that have got people, teams that can work the audience in a different way. So that's an interesting challenge, because we've obviously invested in the technology because we believe it will deliver a greater ROI to the customer. But actually getting them to really invest the time to understand how to do that is frustrating in some places. So that's a piece of work that we've got to handle. I think what I would have said to you 3 weeks ago, prior to those events at the beginning of June, probably has changed a little bit in terms of how you get people out of the office. And it's quite an interesting reflection, really. So we ran our first events for those 2 shows, TCT and MedTech, in September 21. So I think it was the 3rd show post-pandemic, and all the chaos that brought with it in terms of how you got into the building and sort of the COVID passports and everything else. So we ran that really, really early in the piece, and then we had a really short runway to June 22, which again was still quite fraught with challenges because we were locked down early 2022, and we didn't really know that we could market the show until about 8 weeks out. But people were kind and they said, "Wow, great job for running the show," and all the rest of it. But we knew our conversion rates were on the floor, and people had come out, they were good quality, but there was less of them. And I really didn't know what we were going to get at the beginning of June. I had an inclination from a registration point of view, groups of attendees coming from big companies and all the rest of it, but you never really know. Looking back now, I can see that the 21 and 22 shows were effectively a shadow of what trade shows should be. And we had staff that had been through that cycle, but had never really seen trade shows live like they can be. And actually 23 was, those two shows at the beginning of June were really a return to form. And importantly, the point I'm trying to make here is that the conversion rates are back at the level that we saw pre-pandemic. And that tells me once and for all that the appetite for live shows, going out to live shows, and going out as groups to technology source is back close to where we were. So that gives us a lot of confidence that the job of getting people out of the office is perhaps returning to more pre-COVID levels, because for a period of time it was really difficult. You worked your backside off getting registrations to a level that you expected, but then your conversion rate was like a third of what it used to be, and that was kind of tough to take for a while. It also made marketing shows horrendously expensive. We've seen a much better return on our marketing this time, so I'm hopeful that will sort of settle, and then we can just get on with the job of really defining great quality content for visitors to come to. And obviously, part of that is a really good array of exhibitors, and then great conferencing, great learning, and other elements that bring the show to life. And there's a lot of talk around festivalisation of events. And
I was going to come on to that.
Not necessarily that buzzword, but there's a piece in that about giving people lots of reasons to come out. And I think as event organisers, that's our job, is to increasingly push the boundary around what is it that makes somebody come to an event. So that's something else.
Yeah, and I think, you're deep into the markets you serve. I guess you're always, well, I say always, in different ways at certain times, asking what they want as well, right? It's easy for us, for an industry, to say, let's festivalize this event, let's do this, let's do that. But actually, some industries don't want that, don't need that. They want to come for the reasons they're always coming for. So I guess we need to be careful as event organisers, similar to what we just said about event technology and AI, about just picking up on these sort of on vogue ideas and then implementing them. And it might be a bit too disruptive. Would you agree with that?
Absolutely. I mean, I think the bottom line is, if you do something that's different, you better make sure it delivers ROI to you. Otherwise, you're just wasting money and no discernible upside. So it's quite interesting. In the 3D printing space, in the TCT area that we have, our UK market's quite well defined, quite mature. Adoption of that technology is quite advanced. We're now into a sort of an education piece about how you optimize the use, how you choose the right technology. Whereas, in contrast, the Chinese show that we have, TCT Asia, which is in the same market, is very much about selling technology and introducing technology. So there are kind of different points in the adoption cycle, partly because the UK was an early adopter of the technology, and partly because China's a little bit further behind in that regard. Although coming up on the rails really quickly, which isn't an unusual story in the tech space in China. So, actually, you don't need to innovate your features quite as much as you do in the UK and China. And I would say that's probably, you take a view of where the show is in the cycle, you look at the market it's offering. And in some instances, a pure play exhibition where people buy stuff and go home is absolutely fine. At the moment, we'll see how it all develops. So it's just about keeping your eyes open and trying to read trends within the tech sectors that you can then follow and adapt.
And I was going to ask you about the regional differences. And you've got a show, TCT is in Shanghai in September, and you're in Japan, I think, at the beginning of next year, 24. In terms of what their expectations are, both, again, exhibitors, delegates, in terms of the content, the type of event, is it very different to the UK? If someone was listening and had never been to a show in those regions, is it easy just to literally geoclone it and that's it? What do you have to do to get to in front of those people that what they want?
It's an interesting one, because I can be quite pithy and say, there's lots of differences, and there are subtle differences, but
sure.
Ultimately, what we do, and this is, I think, all true for any of that organisation, is if you lose sight of what your primary role is, which is to generate business for your exhibitors and generate learning opportunities for your visitors, then you're going to come unstuck pretty quickly. So from that point of view, there's a fundamental that runs across every trade show in every market in every continent, But from a point of view of say content on TCT, you might find that in the UK we'll be dealing with a lot of innovative ideas that come largely from the UK, and that's what our program would look like. In China or Japan, they're really keen to hear what's going on in Europe, so you have sort of slightly different geographic spread on the conference program. Some markets use resellers, whereas some use, the OEMs will go in directly, depending on the size of the market. So there are subtle differences, and of course, over the years you kind of pick them up, and they become quite normal and natural. But ultimately, you just got to retain focus on getting as many good quality visitors as you can through the door, because that means your exhibitors will rebook.
Sure.
Not making too many bones about it. They're the people that's what the commercial model is based on. So we keep focus on that.
The same as it ever was. I just want to move on quickly. Again, what comes through a lot of the stuff I read about the business is the importance and role of external partners. Now, that could be, I guess, a trade association, could be a co-location partner. Bring that to life, and the importance of partners in serving specialist communities that you operate in.
Yeah, it's an interesting one, because we're a relatively small business, and we didn't have and still don't have offices around the globe like some of the larger organisations do. But we had an ambition to take some of the brands into new markets. We saw opportunities, and so ultimately we've worked to find partners that can help us do that. The majority do the heavy lifting operationally around shows in the countries they operate in. So, but we've got different models. We have a JV in China, which is a 50-50 jointly owned business with V&U Exhibitions in Shanghai, which is, believe it or not, will be our 10th year next year of running TCT Asia in China, which blows my mind, because I can still remember the first time I got on a plane to Shanghai, and it wasn't that long ago. Yeah. We've got partnership in Japan. There's a slightly different partnership in America. We've had all sorts of different approaches. I think in the end, you pick the right partnership for the market you're operating in. One of the things we've always been really clear on is we have to do what's right by the market. So when we were looking in America, can we go ourselves? We had experience of running trade shows over their operations, so we even had that capability. But the market didn't need another show. It needed us as a 30-year experienced organisation in that space, and another one over there to kind of come together to drive that event. So that was the right choice. So yeah, we could have run something ourselves, but actually it wasn't right for the market. And obviously over a period of time you work out a financial agreement that works well. And so we went that way. I'm not ruling out our own individual launches in other countries, but it entirely depends on the sector, the territory, and then whether you can find the right partner, which is also part of the issue. There are some territories we've been looking for partners for a decade and not found the person that you can sit down with and think, yes, I can do business with you. Whereas in other territories, it's been really, really quick. But I guess that's just the organic nature of the different territories you operate in. But gradually, as we've grown as a business, we get more and more people coming to us saying, hey, I can help you here, I can help you there. So a little bit. The visibility makes it a little bit more, a little easier to scout these people. But no, it's going into the pandemic, we made a decision. We'd done so much overseas growth that we were going to have a bit of a pause on it, and lo and behold, we had our pause. So we're back out there now, actively looking to develop our brands in new territories, particularly as travel's really starting to open up again. So
sure,
we'll see where that.
So watch this space. Want to talk to you about talent. Again, I think it says on your website, we don't hire talent, we hire passion with talent. We create a good place to work and support good causes. What role do you believe company culture plays in driving, I guess, organisational growth, employee satisfaction?
Yeah, I think it's really important that we do that. I think the workplace has changed hugely, and talent these days is rightly picky about where it spends its time. So it's important that we create an environment where people are happy to spend a large chunk of their waking hours. But we've developed from there. We've got a really good flexible working policy that we've built that means that people can take work from home days
Sure.
throughout the year, and they can start when they want when they come in the office and finish when they want, as long as they do within sort of certain parameters. So we've worked hard to create an environment where it's interesting for people to come to work, but it doesn't overtake their own personal lives. And then you just want to develop people. What that means is occasionally good people leave you, which is frustrating, but you can't look at it and go, oh, I should have was trying to hang on to them. You kind of let it go occasionally. And fortunately, one or two of them have gone and come back, which is always nice.
Yeah.
But we've got a really good group. I think the pandemic shook out some of the people who maybe weren't as invested in the company as we would like, because they naturally decided they were going to off and do other things. I think the pandemic was really interesting for that point of view, in terms of getting any talent, good, bad, ugly, or otherwise, sort of assess what they really wanted to do in their lives. And what we've been left with, I think, is a really, really good group of people that we've then been able to adapt our environment. We're in a new office here, which is really, really nice compared to the one we were in pre-pandemic. So all of those things go towards creating an environment that hopefully people will come to work in and feel comfortable in. And then beyond that, it's about making sure that we do the right things by people, develop them, support them, give them the opportunity to learn, put them on planes to amazing cities on the other side of the world that they never thought they were going to go to, and just create a situation where we build a real team. Now, we don't always get it right, and there'll always be somebody that you can't make it work for, and for that I'm always a little bit sad, particularly when they're really good people. But we're at sort of 50 people now, and when you get to that size, that not everybody is going to be a long-term hire. You hire a lot of people, and I have done over the years. And whilst I can look at a group of people and think they were all amazing hires, for each one of those, there's probably one that didn't work out for whatever reason. And sometimes that would have been our business, or not us not getting it right at that point. But we strive to make less and less of those mistakes, and I think we're making progress in those areas.
Sure, thank you. So, I mean, I guess the message is, you as the leader, the business has to keep evolving to, retain, acquire new talent. There's been lots of changes over the last few years. I come from a generation where would have been unheard of when I first went into work. I want to work from home, or can I leave this, or can I do that? And it can be difficult. Again, I've spoken to lots of CEOs, both on and off camera, that, they do things they got to do. Doesn't always sit with them because they come from, a different place or a different generation. But I guess you've got to move with the times.
Yeah, I mean, look, my generation, I don't think it's a huge amount different to yours, Dan. I don't quite know how precisely how old you are, but looking at a lack of hair, they're probably about the same age. But going into the pandemic, I always had a little bit of a suspicion about people working from home. Were they going to put the work in? Or were they going to sat watching the telly? I don't mind admitting that, and that's part of the evolution that I've gone through as a leader, is saying, well, actually, no, let's not set the bar for the lowest common denominator. So let's set the bar for the top people, and people that are going to commit. And so we've got this really, really good, flexible, open policy, which is designed around allowing people to make adult choices about when and where they work, as long as they do that work. And so those people that do sit on the sofa generally get found out in that process. So that was a piece of me changing through the pandemic.
Yeah.
But I think, as I said earlier, the pandemic changed the way a lot of people think about what they do and how they do it. But you have to evolve. I mean, I think when I started, I was in a classified sales floor at Miller Freeman in a tower block in Woolwich. When you made your sale, you stood on the bell, and then you got back on the phone, and we had no email, and one green screen between five of us. It was very different. And I think as much as that, you look back at that, and I look back at it quite fondly. It was a great grounding for me, but the world has changed, and people's expectations have changed. And as a leader of a business that wants to attract new talent because it needs to, you have to adapt, and so consequently you make those shifts. I think the leader of me 20 years ago would look at this one and go, not sure you're the same guy, but that's okay.
Yeah,
I'm comfortable with it.
Yeah, I'm sure we can swap tales of the early 90s when people used to smoke at their desks. So definitely a different world.
You just now look back and go, I can't believe that happened.
Listen,
But,
Duncan, you've been with the business, if I'm not mistaken, for almost 18 years.
yeah, probably. That makes you sound really
lots of talk, lots of, I guess, the younger generations, I think it's Gen Z, get them all wrong. People, they're not told that the messages, don't necessarily stay somewhere in one place. There's always something else that's maybe have a look at this and do that. What has led to you remaining in one business, albeit in different roles, or maybe that's the reason, for such a period of time?
Yeah, I mean, I think I started in '97 maybe, and did about 5 years and often did some other things. So, in my early career, I was quite open to trying different things and getting different experience. But the original director of the business asked me to come back in 2005, and then since then, really, I've had a pretty good sort of churn of roles and progression, which has meant that I've always been challenged and I've always been given additional responsibility, whether that was people or P&L, and so I've kind of grown up here, and obviously we've done some pretty successful things. So, but I'm now a shareholder as well. So from that point of view, my work is not done here, but I'm also pretty personally invested in what we do. I think that's good from a point of view of the way I drive the business forward, and there's never a point where I don't put the extra yard in, but equally, I can see from outside that it might look as though, well, maybe I should have some extra experience. But I've had some pretty good experience in lots of different challenges, and whether that's crisis management through the pandemic and things like that, versus overseas development. So for me, it's been a fortunate path.
Sure.
Major shareholders back me to run the business for him, and been a big part of what we've done. So from that point of view, it's never been a situation where I've felt the need to look over the fence. And we've got a lot of people in the business who have been here for 10 years plus, who've been along the journey with me. So we've built a good core team here that, like I said earlier, if you look to develop people and you look to give them opportunity to develop their skill sets and their experiences, then hopefully you do retain good talent. And I think that's something we've been pretty good at.
You touched upon it before, but just in summary, what do you think are the most important characteristic and traits for a good leader to have?
Gosh, it's a Pandora's box for that one. I think empathy is important. I think when you lead a team, whether it's 10, 20, 50, the bigger it gets, the more exposures you have to personal challenges that those individuals have. And certainly in my younger years, I was particularly tolerant of the chaos that came with leading a team, and the challenges that kind of appear. I think over the years you develop an understanding, and that's partly to do with having your own families and all that kind of stuff. And so I think empathy is really important. I think just staying focused is really important. Where are we trying to get to? Lose sight of the mission, and you tend to drift. So that and reminding everybody that's within the group that you lead and keeping them on track is really important. And I'm just a big one for effort. I can forgive all manner of screw ups and mistakes as long as people are trying as hard as they possibly can. And that for me is really important. So, coasters need not apply. We want volunteers, not hostages, so to speak.
Thank you. And obviously you run, obviously you've got publications, but obviously a good focus of your business is events. What do you love most? What do you love most about the events industry and hosting events?
I think like anybody, I didn't set out to be an event organizer. I've listened to many of your interviews, and I don't think there's a single person that has ever gone, I definitely wanted to be in events when I was at school. I think we all fall into it. But when you do, you find a group of people that are just so dedicated, creative, innovative, and focus again. When you've got, you think about when you turn up on site to build a show. There's a group of people that come together for that. Health and safety teams, floor managers, and a lot of these people aren't permanent employees. But everybody just gets on, and everybody focuses, and everybody wants to do the very best they can for the exhibitors and make sure they work really well. There's something about that. So for me, that little bit of friction of excitement when you get on site for a build, and as a CEO, what the hell am I doing at the build? Rocking at 9 o'clock when it opens, but that's not the way I operate. I want to be there. I want to support the team. I want to be there to help troubleshoot or just pat people on the back. So for that point of view, I'm always around the builds, and I still quite like that sort of thing. I think it's a physical manifestation of what it would be doing. So it's nice to be around. I think the thing that's also funny is the post sort of show blues, which I've seen over the years. You do a show, and it doesn't matter whether it's in the UK or not. There's this sort of period where you've got this jet lag afterwards, which is probably the bit I don't like about it, because it's kind of, but also it's part of the process, and it's about reflecting on the success of the event you've done. So probably the actual bit of delivering the event is the best bit. I mean, nobody loves stressing over sales targets or operational cost lines, but that's part of the process. But if you go through that process, then delivering the live event and seeing the exhibitors having a good show and visitors saying it was amazing is probably the piece you would.
Fantastic. Thank you. Listen, Duncan, really appreciative of your time. We wish you the very best of luck with the remainder of your shows this year. I know, as we just discussed, you've got a show in Shanghai, and you've got Interplas, which is coming up in Birmingham as well in September. So we look forward to seeing the business and the shows and the publications going from strength to strength.
Thank you, Dan. Really enjoyed the chat, and thanks for the opportunity.
Thank you.